Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session doing some Endgame study on LeeChess.org. Now, if you saw my last video, and please do watch my last video on this topic because you're gonna need to understand the concepts behind that last video in order to take a look at this one. So really quick, let's talk about this position from our last video. Now, in the last video, we said that white to move is actually a draw in this position because no matter where the white king goes, the black king is always going to follow him. He's always going to be like his best friend. He's just gonna stick to him like glue. It's just gonna be like never gonna let you up, never gonna let you down. And there's nothing that white can do about it. Because if, let's say, he comes to the side to try and trick black into following him, then the black king doesn't follow him. He just comes in and takes the pawn. And if we push the pawn, we enter into this mother of king and pawn endgames. Now, you'll remember that when I originally talked about this mother of king and pawn endgames, I said that pawn, king, king, king beside the pawn, king in front of the pawn, draw. But here you'll see that the king is beside the pawn, the king is in front of the pawn, but it's black to move. Not like those other positions where we go king beside the pawn, face to face. King behind the pawn, king behind the pawn, king in front of the pawn. King beside the pawn, face to face. This time, we can't do that. We can't do that because the king is beside the pawn, but it's our move. And now look, it's king beside the pawn, but look, we are in front of the pawn. We're not face to face. However, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because now that white has to move, he has to somehow give it up, and now we are in this position again. That technique that I talked about, king behind the pawn, king in front of the pawn, king beside the pawn, face to face, opposition, doesn't actually matter unless you're on the back rank. So what is the difference between this position here, all the way from the beginning, all the way from the beginning, what is the difference between this position here and this position here? You'll notice king beside the pawn, king in front of the pawn, like everything's the same. Black has the opposition, yeah? Black has the opposition. There's no king progress to be made. Black has the opposition. But in this position, when the pawn is pushed, look at the position. King beside the pawn, and we can't go in front. King, pawn, king, pawn. Promotion. And that is the difference between a position as simple as this and a position as simple as this, where despite the similarities, king in front of the pawn, black has the opposition. When we move it back a rank, the huge difference is that this king no longer has these retreat squares to go to. and has to give up the opposition in order to stay in front of the pawn. But unfortunately, that leads to white being able to promote. So really quick, again, if this king stays in front, if we just move the king around, there's no progress to be made. Do it from the other side this time. But you'll see that now this king has to give up the key square. Has to give up the key square, and now we can promote. There's no way to defend this square. Just a small little nuance in between putting this pawn and this king. These two kings could be anywhere on the board, and it would be a draw. We could move this position all the way back here. We could move this position all the way back here. We could move it here. We could put this pawn on e2. We could put this pawn on e3, as long as the king's directly in front. And it would still be a draw. We could move this position back any rank. But if we move it up one rank, all of a sudden it moves from a draw to a loss. These little nuances. Let's take a look at another nuance. Here you'll see it's black to move. This is again this little nuance. Now, if it were white to move and white enters the position, we can, boom, just take the opposition, right? If white tries to enter, we can just, bam, knock it out, be his best friend, like, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna let you enter my key squares to control this position. But unfortunately, it is not white to move. It is black to move. And so we have to figure out, how do you maintain the draw? And in this position, the key is something called the distant opposition. Now, the distant opposition is not where we have the kings directly face to face. It is a position where any move the king makes allows us to take the opposition. Let's look at that in practice. Now, our winning move, if we move here or here, unfortunately, we're lost. But if we make the one saving move, we can hold the draw. Let's take a look at the loss really quick. Now, if we try to enter, you can see we have to give up the opposition. And this is that position we were talking about before, yeah? Where no matter what you do, you can't stop the king from escorting his pawn. So we need to create this position, right? We need to create this position so that wherever the king goes, we can enter. And the way we do that is by not going here or here, but by making it so that whenever the king steps forward, we step forward too, with the opposition. And the way we're going to do that, the way we're going to maintain access to these two oppositional squares, right? Here's one square we can have the opposition. Here's another square where we can have the opposition. So we need to maintain contact with these two squares. So we're going to come here. And now anywhere the king goes, let's do it a little bit simpler first. If the king tries to enter, we're just going to enter with the opposition. If the king tries to get sneaky, we can be sneaky too. And we can maintain our access to these oppositional squares. King steps forward, we're going to step forward. Rick Astley, never going to give you up, never going to let you down, never going to let you enter my position. Let's take a look at that against the computer, shall we? Let's take a look at this position against the computer. This position that we know is a loss for black. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So these two nuances, right? Like when and if the opposition, how it matters, why it matters. So you can see that this pawn moves makes black waste that move and give up the opposition, give up that key defensive maneuver. Okay, so here we know from this position that because black is on the back rank, it doesn't even matter that this king has this opposition because we can make him give it up with a pawn move. For example, he's not going to try. We know he's not going to try because if he came here, I would push the pawn. He would go back. I'd push the pawn again. And now you can see that I control, with the pawn here, I control these two squares. This is the resulting position anyways. So Stockfish decides, okay, I see the loss, and I'm just going to try and prolong the checkmate as long as possible by getting my king to the middle of the board. But we still have to win it, right? We still have to win it. Now, I can win, actually, by giving the check, because king here, pawn here, it's the same position. But I think the more principled way to win is by taking the opposition. It's not the quickest win, actually, but it's the more principled win. And we've seen this position before. Let's take a look from the other side. Okay, so the most principled way to continue, not the best way, but the most principled way to continue is to try to remain face to face with this king. So let's go ahead and do that. But now I can no longer do it. I have to give up the opposition because the king is beside the pawn, but I can't stay face to face. If I had some way to just pass, I could draw, but I don't. So I have to move here. Now, there's no way for me to stay in front of this pawn, so king comes here, and he's going to guide his king in. So my best way to continue is just to try to stay in the middle of the board. And you can see how he sort of cuts me off, and he's going to try and checkmate on me on these squares. I can give that up in good conscience. All right. So let's take a look at this. Now the computer's going to pull some sneaky moves on me on this one, I'm certain. There are many ways to sort of try to sneak someone into giving up the opposition in these positions, and we'll take a look at those as they come up. Hot. Very hot. All right. White to move. Yeah, so he already made his move. Here are our access squares. Here are the access squares for white and for black. Now we want one of us to enter. Like black is trying to get his king to enter here so that way white can enter here. Here with the opposition. We're trying to trick each other into getting the opposition. So this is an immediate draw. We've talked about that, right? Let's try to be a little bit sneaky. There's no way for me to continue. Like now, if I try to come here, you can see that black has the opposition again. And we know this drawing position. We know this position very well now. And we know that because this king is not on the back rank, when I come here, he still has time. Now, the reason why he has time is because I have to waste another pawn move, you see. So right now, white has the opposition, but if he wants to make progress, he has to spend another pawn move. You see? And this pawn move is what gives black back the opposition. So while, yes, white has the opportunity to seize the opposition, that opposition does nothing for him, does nothing for him, for her, if he can't get his pawn to the back rank. And in order to get his pawn back to the rank, he contradictorily has to give back the opposition to black. And this is why it doesn't matter, actually, to maintain opposition when your king's not on the back rank. It is still the best principled move. king beside the pawn, face to face, king behind the pawn, king in front of the pawn, king behind, king in front, king behind, king in front, king to the side, face to face. Draw. Let's take a look at that from the black side. This is going to be a little bit trickier for me because Stockfish probably knows some tricks that I don't. So, access squares, oppositional squares. We need to maintain touch with our oppositional squares. So the only square in this position that maintains contact with both of these oppositional squares is D8. Now he came in, so I'm also going to come in, and there's no way for him to make progress. Now, by stepping to E7, I give up the opposition, but it doesn't matter because in order for this pawn to make progress, he needs to give the opposition back. And I'm gonna king behind the pawn, king in front. He's already given back the opposition in what he's done. So here, in any other position, by pushing this pawn forward, he gives me that chance to retake the opposition because otherwise there's no feasible way for him to try to make progress. Now it really matters. It really matters to stay in front. So king to the side, face to face, king behind, king in front, king behind, king in front. Now I can come here or I can come here. It doesn't matter. If I come here, he goes here, I stay in front. I can also just come here, and if he goes back, I can repeat. Important to note that if I went to f8 trying for this diagonal opposition idea, I lose because king d7 and he promotes. So don't try to get too clever with it. King behind, king in front. King behind, king in front. And he just gives up the pawn. Yes, I drew 2600 Stockfish. I'm so good. How long have we done this video? 17 minutes. I feel that that's a reasonable time. I hope that you guys have sort of gotten a grip on this sort of diagonal opposition, trying to maintain access to these contact squares, these oppositional squares. Until the next time, thanks so much, guys, and good luck with your chess journey. Bye-bye for now.